Hello, welcome to section 5.6. We're going to learn about inverses of a function today. First thing I want you to do is write down these 4 steps. We're going to be doing these 4 steps today and the next 2 days also. So it says, here's how you find the inverse of a function. Number 1, first you replace your f of x with a y. Step 2, swap the x and y. Literally, they trade places in the equation. The third step is where all the work, if there is work, is going to be, because you have to take your new equation and solve it for y. So that means that you're going to get y on one side of equals all by itself. And then the very last step, that y that you solve for, you're going to replace it with f inverse. Now, I asked you the other day as an AMI lesson to find out what inverse meant, inverse of a function. Inverse of a function is when a function reverses what the first function did. So here's what that means. That means when you have an input, and your book's going to talk about input, output. When you put an input in for x, you get an output of y. When you put that output of y into your inverse function, it becomes the new input, and what it will give you is a new output that was your original x value. Okay, so hopefully you have steps 1 through 4 written down. Okay, go to example 1. Example 1 says f of x is equal to 2x plus 3. Find the inverse function. So we're going to do that first. And then it says if f of x is equal to -7 is an output. In other words, you put in some value for x right here, and you got an answer of -7. That's its output, because they said you put into f and you got an output of -7. Then it's saying, what was the x value of that input? In other words, what did you put in here that gave you an answer of -7? But let's find the inverse first, and then we'll talk about how to answer that final question. So step 1, replace f of x with y. Step 2, swap your x and y. They literally just trade places. Okay, now here's where all the work comes in. You have to get that y value by itself. So since they took 2 times y and added 3 as the last step, our first step will be to subtract the 3. So we'll get x minus 3 is equal to 2y. And then since they took 2 times y, I'm going to divide by 2. And I'm going to bring my answer up because I've run out of room. So we're going to say x minus 3 divided by 2 is equal to y. Step 4, replace that y with f inverse. So I'm going to say x minus 3 divided by 2 is equal to the inverse of f. Okay, this is our inverse function. And what that means is every value you put in for x is going to kick out a y. If you take that y value and put it right here and work the problem, it will kick it back to the x that you put in, because inverse functions undo what the first one did. So let's give it a try, okay? We're going to try it before we actually answer the question. So let's say somebody came to the y here and they wanted to find f of 1. Well, if you do f of 1, then that means you're taking 2 times 1 and you're adding 3. Well, 2 times 1 is 2 plus 3 is 5. Okay, I'm going to use this and plug it into my inverse because the output of this function was 5. So I'm going to put 5 into my inverse. So I come over to here and it says 5 minus 3 divided by 2. So 5 minus 3 divided by 2. Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1. Notice that was what you plugged in. So when you put in 1, you got a y value of 5. When you put 5 into the inverse function, it takes you back to the original x. Okay, this is considered the input in function f. This is its output. This is the input in the inverse, and this is. So here's what the second part said. It says, if f of x equals -7. So they're saying, if I put a number here, I got -7 as an output. What was the x value that was used in an input? So I'm going to use that -7 and I'm going to put it into the inverse. So f inverse of -7 means -7 minus 3 divided by 2. So that's going to be -10 divided by 2, which is -5. So this was your original input. And you can even check. If you take that -5 and you put it right, well, let's go here. 2 times -5 is -10. -10 plus 3 is that -7. So we know this was our original input. Not too bad, huh? Okay, let's go to example 2. We're just going to keep doing the same kind of thing, all right? I tried to give you a variety of questions. So example 2, f of x is equal to 2x squared. Find the inverse function, and then it goes on and it says, if f of x is equal to 2 as an output, what was the x value as an input? So it's asking us the same kind of question. So first, I'm going to let y equal my 2x squared. Step 2, I'm going to swap my x and y. So x is equal to 2y squared. Third step has all the work. I've got to get y by itself. Now this is a different kind of problem because our y is squared, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I'm going to divide by 2. And then I'm going to bring this up because I've run out of room. Now, when the y is squared, we're going to have to do the square root of both sides. But if you remember from, I believe it was our first section in this chapter, when you do a square root, there is a plus and minus value. That's going to be the case here. So I'm going to take the square root of this and the square root of this. This side does become y, but over here, I'm going to have a positive and a negative. And then I replace my y value with f inverse. So I'm going to bring that on up here, and I'm going to say plus or minus the square root of x over 2 is equal to the inverse of x. So here's our inverse. We actually have 2 of them. You can write these as 2 separate equations. You can say f inverse equals the square root of x over 2, and then the second one would say f inverse of x equals negative square root of x over 2. Your calculator does not have a plus minus key, so you're going to have to do each one of these separate, not together. Okay, the second part of this, if f of x is equal to 2 as an output, what was the x value as an input? So what we're doing, we're finding f inverse of 2, which means I have positive 2 divided by 2, and I also have the negative version. Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1. The square root of 1 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. The square root of that is 1, but then it's also negative. So you could write this as plus or minus 1 if you would rather, or you can write them 2 separate. But there are 2 values here that was the value for the input. So let's check. Okay, let's say that you put in a positive 1 over here. 1 squared is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. If you put in -1, -1 squared means -1 times -1 times 2 gives me 2. Both answers work. You only have to do this plus minus if you're taking the square root of something that's squared. If it's a cube root, you don't have to do it. Remember that rule, if it was even, it's plus or minus. If it's odd, it's just the answer. Okay, let's go to example 3. The reason I picked this one is because it has some fractions involved. So example 3, f of x is equal to negative 2/3 x plus 1. Find the inverse function. So let's do that first. Okay, we're going to replace f of x with y. I'm going to do step 2 and swap my x's and y's. Step 3 is where all the work comes in. So since they took negative 2/3 times y and then added 1, I need to subtract the 1 first. And then I'm going to bring my work up here. Now, there's two ways to do this next part. You can divide it by negative 2/3. I totally agree with that. But I'm going to show you a slightly different way because I think it will make more sense to you. Okay, I'm going to multiply by the 3 first. So I'm going to take this side times 3, and I'm going to take this whole side times 3. That means I need to distribute this. So this is going to be 3x minus 3. And over here, these cancel and leave me with a negative 2y. Now to get y by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. Now you can divide both of these, or you can just leave it like this. I'm going to leave it like this because I have an idea the math's probably going to be easier if I leave it like this. So 3x minus 3 divided by a negative 2 is equal to my y, which I'm going to make f inverse. So there's my inverse function. Okay, the second part of this, it says, if f of x, so the original, gave me an answer of negative 3 as an output, what was the x value as an input? So I'm going to take that negative 3 and I'm going to put it here. So I'm going to find f inverse of negative 3. So 3 times negative 3 minus 3 divided by 2. Well, this is negative 9. Negative 9 minus 3 is negative 12. Divided by 2 is negative 6. So negative 6 must have been the original input. Let's find out. Okay, if I take negative 2/3 times negative 6, negative 2 times negative 6 is 12. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Excuse me, negative, did I do that right? Negative 9 minus 3, negative 12. Okay, so let's try again. Okay, so I'm going to take negative 2/3 times 6. So that'll be a positive 12 divided by 3 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. Something's wrong, so let me find my mistake. Okay, let's see. We need to subtract 1, and then we times by 3, and then we divided by negative 2. I think I wrote that correct. Oh, here it is. I left my negative off. Sometimes we learn a lot by the teacher's mistakes. So it should be positive 6. Okay, let's try positive 6 and see if it works. That's why you should always check. Okay, let's put in 6. So negative 2 times 6 is negative 12. Divided by 3 is negative 4. And negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. Okay, now I agree with my answer. That should be a 6. Make sure that looks like a pretty good subtraction sign, and then I smeared it. Okay, I hope this section seems fairly easy. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me when I come back. Okay, your assignment on this one is page 281, 5 through 11, the odd problems. Have a good day.